Good
Okay.
afternoon. We have 4 guests.
So let's just walk through the slide deck. Let's share that. Vivian, I'm going to share it with you. And if you could just share it with everybody.
I'm sorry, you want me to share the deck?
Yeah. The information was already sent. It pretty much, the deck contains what is in that the information that was shared last night, but it's just a good idea for all of us to be on the same page. So let's get started, and I'm gonna share my screen, and there will be opportunity for public comment. We already know we have 4 people, so when we get to that point, we can give each person 5 minutes to speak. So Anika, did you want to start us off, or?
Of course I do. So good afternoon, everyone, again, and welcome to our Superintendent's Budget Advisory Council. This is our, I don't know how many times we've met. It seems like it's been a lot. It's also like, oh my gosh, it hasn't been enough because we have some big decisions to make. So excited for you all to be here, and appreciate you all who are able to stay until 6 o'clock. As you might recall, that we did discuss extending this meeting by 30 minutes. On this slide here, you see our proposed agenda and our objectives. After public comments, we're going to take some time to quickly review the foci that we've shared in previous sessions, remind us all of our core values for resource allocation, and quickly review our tiered strategy for budget development. And then we'll spend the bulk of the first part of the meeting exploring and evaluating our funding requests and recommendations at the various tiers, with the first chunk being really making sure that you all understand what we are recommending for tier 1, what we are recommending for like the things that we just gotta do as we think about next year's budget. We'll spend some time explaining that, and then engaging you in some questions and answers and getting some of your thoughts. Then we're going to review some of the other requests that were made that we have not yet figured out if we can or will fund. And then we're going to review those and then give you an assignment that you definitely need to do. That'll give you some opportunities to give some feedback and kind of rank or tier those. And then we'll close up the meeting. So we anticipate it being a pretty robust meeting. So grab your water or your Coke or whatever it is that you need to get yourselves through this, and appreciate everybody for your thoughtful participation in advance. I do want to just quickly remind folks of a couple of things before we go into public comments. So I'm going to ask Ms. Vivian to go to the next slide. Looks like that's not in the proper order. So go to slide 5, please, Ms. Vivian. Want to remind folks who are members of the SBAC to please make sure, and I'm probably doing horrible modeling, I am, if you can put your name and then what organization or what advisory group you represent. So, mine should say Inikia Fort Marthel BUSD. I'm not a voting member, but for those of you who represent PAC or DLAC or other groups, just if you could help us remember and know that by indicating that in your name, that would be appreciated. I also want to remind folks that we are saving the chat only for folks who are voting members, and we really want to use the chat when it's asked to be used because it can easily be a distraction for folks. And we're going to be looking at a lot of numbers and a lot of things on the screen. So just reserve the chat 4 times that we've designated for the chat to be used. Of course, you can also use the chat if you have a question or comment and we can't see your hand and you need to jump in. Also reminding everyone that only SBAC representatives can vote. We won't be voting, but we will be asking for a lot of input. And so if you are a member of the audience, we welcome you. We're glad that you're here. But after public comments, we're going to ask you again to not use the chat feature and not chime in. Next slide, please. This slide is just a quick reminder of all the different ways to engage via Zoom, how to mute and unmute your mic, how to raise your hand, etc. Please know that because we are in presentation mode, I can personally only see about 7 of your beautiful faces at any given time, which means you might be raising your hand and I can't see it. And so again, if you're raising your hand and you're not getting a response, please feel free to unmute and say, hey, over here, and then we'll make sure to turn our attention to you. Next slide. I also want to remind folks in our audience and our voting members that we have an appendix that has key terms, and those are all terms that you will hear and have heard oftentimes in these budget conversations. We try to refrain from using acronyms, but if you are finding yourself wondering, please feel free to ask, but also know that this resource is available to you at the end of our presentation deck and is included in every deck. And then finally, I want to bring us into this space by grounding us in our district mission, which is to enable and inspire our diverse student body to achieve academic excellence and make positive contributions to the world. They say, show me how you budget and I'll know what your values are, what's important to you. I totally butchered that quote, but you get the idea. And so this is our opportunity to really look at the various asks that we have and think about which ones we're going to prioritize, for lack of a better term, which ones we're going to fund for the next school year so that we can move closer to realizing this mission statement for all of our students. And so with that, I'm going to pause and mute my mic, and I'm going to have Ms. Vivian call for public comments.
I'm also going to stop my share. So
the first person is Brent Blackaby.
Hi, yes. Good
Hi.
afternoon. Good afternoon. Good afternoon, Superintendent. Good afternoon, board members and members of the Budget Advisory Committee. My name is Brent Blackaby. I'm the chair of the school site committee at Cragmont, and I'm the father of a Cragmont kindergartner. I also speak for more than 100 parents and teachers that sent a letter to the superintendent and to the board earlier this year, and dozens more parents at schools across the district that are urging immediate action on school safety at every BUSD campus. We're really concerned about the ongoing high-level security risk that enables a potential active shooter to easily gain entrance to school campuses and classrooms all across the district. And we believe that safety must be an urgent and escalated priority reflected in next year's budget. At Cragmont alone, just speaking from my personal experience, there are 2 wide open stairways that provide unfettered access to school grounds 24/7 without gates or fencing. Having talked to parents and teachers from a whole variety of BUSD campuses independently, these families and teachers and parents have come up with their own set of security concerns that have to be addressed at every campus. So this is not a one school issue. This is a district-wide issue that affects every campus. But for I like to thank the superintendent. I want to thank board members for engaging with us on this topic. The collaboration has started, the conversation is happening. We appreciate that. We also have an upcoming meeting planned for May 22nd with John Calise, facilities director, and the superintendent, and a lot of concerned folks to dive into this in detail. And we appreciate that engagement very, very much. It's really important. But for this committee, I wanted to make 3 specific asks because this is the budget committee. This is the place where we put that concern into action. And like the superintendent just said, this is a way of a budget being a reflection of our priorities and our values. So here are the 3 asks that I'd urge you to consider. One is to fully fund and hire a district-wide safety coordinator. It's my understanding that last year's budget fully authorized this position, but the role was not filled. The position was not hired. So my ask is please to authorize this, budget this, and fund and hire this role in the coming year. I think it's really important to have a person who's really focused on safety at every campus all across the district, and that's their number 1 concern. Number 2, I'd ask that you set aside some funds in the budget for some immediate quick win safety fixes on each Berkeley campus. I appreciate that there's a long multi-year facilities process and cycle, but we can't afford to wait for some of these safety fixes. Each school already has a list of needs, whether it's cameras or door locks and buzzers or gates. And I think it's really important just to show progress and momentum to get something done to improve safety at every school right away. So let's have some budget for some immediate quick wins that we can go back to the community and say, hey, look, we're making progress. I think that's really important. And third, I just ask that we support the creation of a district-wide safety task force. I know that's not really a budget issue, but this is an important group of people who can influence the process. And I think a task force that's comprised of district staff, teachers, and parents from every school, as well as members of the police department and other city agencies, that meets monthly to elevate safety issues and works collaboratively to solve them as quickly as possible, is a really important venue for continuing the dialogue. I think parents are concerned and frustrated, and we just need some communication and transparency, multi-direction, and that would go a long ways to doing that. So those are the three asks: safety coordinator, funds for immediate quick fixes, and to support the task force. Look, I know everyone wants to do the right thing. I know everyone's committed to doing the right thing. So it's not doubting anyone's intentions. We all have the best intentions, but I'm concerned that we need to have that reflected in the budget, this year's budget and subsequent year budgets, to really make safety a priority. So thank you for your time, and I appreciate it.
Thank you, Mr. Blackaby. The next person is Shireen Mohammed. Shaheen
Yes.
Mohammed, excuse me.
No worries. Here I go. Hi, everyone. Shaheen Mohammed here, Dean of Students at Berkeley High and Principal's Designee on our Berkeley High's School Safety Committee. I'm here to speak on behalf of Berkeley High students, families, constituents that we serve to advocate for an increase in the number of school safety officers we have. We recently, I believe, Principal Regoza put his budget proposal together for the following year, requesting 16, total of 16 safety officers. We currently have 12. And we have a few great subs who can come, every now and again, but really increasing that number is really important. And then the safety committee actually submitted a memo further increasing that number to 18. Honestly, like, I'll take 20, whatever you can. Well, not whatever, 16 really is a dire number. 18 will really ensure that we can do some great things as far as safety is concerned here at Berkeley High. So as you guys are making your decisions, just a few things to consider. Just coming out of the pandemic, we're seeing, different types of behaviors that we want to be able to address or prevent, things from happening. And that requires manpower, strategizing, being able to, think outside the box, and just really being able to tag team on each other. And when you're short in staff, it's, we're all, especially the safety officers, are pretty, we're spread pretty thin. We have opened our brand new A building, which, it requires one whole FTE in itself. Community theater just had a grand opening, and it's going to be, up and running hopefully sooner than later. And so as we turn, as we become more and more, reach full capacity, we really need to ensure that so is our school safety team. And so, really urge you guys to approve us at least getting 16 that we can start, hiring, recruiting, training, and be ready to go when August rolls around. And outside of this meeting, if anybody has any questions or require additional information, you know where to find me. I'm here at Berkeley High, happy to answer any question anybody has.
Thank you. Next is Josh Austin.
Hi, everyone. I'm a teacher at Berkeley High. It's my 14th year at Berkeley High. I'm 18 years in the district. I teach special ed, and I'm also a BFT site rep and organizer. So I represent a lot of teachers, but I've also talked to safety officers on the floor where I work in the H building and administrators, and we all agree that our safety officers are doing a wonderful job, but there just aren't enough. So I strongly support at least 4 more, like the levels we've had in the past. We had 4 more than we do now. And I've been going to safety committee meetings at Berkeley High. I plan to serve on the committee next year. And I'm going to be really brief and just ask you to please consider hiring more safety officers as Berkeley High administrators, teachers, and classifieds are requested. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Austin. Corey Rowland is next.
Hi, everyone. My name is Corey Rowland. I have been at Berkeley High for about 5 or 6 years now. I teach in the same building that Josh teaches in. I teach in the G and H buildings at Berkeley High, and I'm also here to advocate for an increase in safety officers on campus. Based on my observations and experience, and through talking with some safety officers, it really does seem like the current safety officers are spread very thin. And those of you who have been on Berkeley High's campus know it's a very large campus, and like Shaheen was just outlining, like as the A building is reopening, and there are going to be even in larger areas for students to be occupying in the coming years. I think it's especially important to have more personnel on campus. my classrooms that I teach in this year are very close to the breezeway that's along MLK, and that one area in particular is just, I think, a very like easy way for people who are not supposed to be on campus to get in. And because of the current number of safety officers, I think there's currently just one safety officer who's mainly on that G&H hallway, and it just seems like a way too big of an area for one person to be responsible for. Especially given there's like a very main entrance to the school in that hallway. And so just to be brief, wanted to reiterate the points that people have made already and just advocate for an increase of at least 4 or more safety officers for the next school year.
Thank you, Mr. Rowland. Adriana, Betty.
Hey, good evening, everyone. I'm the executive director for RISE, former math teacher in the school district. I would just wanted to chime in to make some clarifications on a few things. We have put in a proposal. So just to information on RISE, we started in 1996. Our program was initiated by young people looking for educational inequity. At that time, the city took it up and funded it 100%, and it has always been funded solely by the city. In 1998, I took on this position as director. At the time when I took on this position, I had 6 case managers. So that means that we could help 300 kids. Every 2 years, we have to file a new RFP with the city for funding. And now that has changed to 4 years. So our contract with the city ends June 2024, our 4-year contract. So this fall, I need to enter into a new 4-year contract with the city. Every year, the city is asking me to diversify funds. In other words, the city should not be the only one supporting our program, or shouldn't be 100% only funded by us. So that being said, I wanted to readdress our partnership. BUSD has been 0% since 1976. And we want to look at what does it mean if BUSD actually accepts us as a partner and actually contributes. Well, one thing is it means that when I submit the RSVP this fall, that the city actually sees that now we finally are diversifying funds. With that, of course, the city has more faith in us, and our a budget wouldn't continually drop as it has over the years. We started in 98 with about 400,000. And every year we're not diversifying. And we're not diversifying from the one agency that actually gets 100% of the benefits of our work. So with that being said, if we were to partner, and I put this on the fall RFP, that looks good. It also allows me room to even ask the city for more. But what does that mean to our campus? That means that we can hire 2 more case managers, female case managers. I currently have 2 male case managers, and it means that we can take on 92 more students. We also are doing a huge mental health effort. So I'm writing a lot of grants to get the funding, for the Healing Through Our Stories. We're doing a research project. So there's a lot of things that we're investing in that are solely going to be benefiting the Berkeley Unified School District. So we just wanted to kind of clarify the history of RISE, where it is, who funds it, and what the city has been saying. The city does adore our program, but again, they cannot be the 100% funder of our program. So I just wanted to add that in.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Any more public comments? People join late? No? Okay. Hi, Nicole. I'm sorry you're feeling bad. So I'm going to take roll behind the scenes for the sake of time. So Pauline, you can have it from here. Or
Okay, I am going to share my screen again, and then we can start our presentation.
So Pauline, when you share, if you could just go ahead and start on slide 10. I'm gonna start talking to our folks. So I don't know about y'all, but I'm already like just taking a deep breath. And so I encourage you all to do a quick inhale and an exhale, because we are about to start to engage in some good conversation that ultimately will inform some very critical and important decisions You've had the opportunities to hear from our public commenters, and you've heard public commenters even in previous meetings. And so you know that the task that we have ahead of us is not an easy task. And I say that because we are well resourced, but we're not balling like that, right? Which means that we have to make some decisions. We can do anything, but we cannot do everything, right? And we have so many amazing partnerships and programs. We have so many great ideas of things that we want to do for our students. We have so many asks, and quite honestly, we have so many needs, right? And we're going to have to consider all of those within a very fixed and set budget. So I'm giving that to you in all transparency and all honesty, because that is the hard work. And that is in part why this committee exists, is to provide thought partnership to me and my team at the district office to really help us make some pretty hard decisions. But I'm going to, again, ask you to really hold that quote that says we can do anything, but we can't do everything. And the things that we don't end up doing, that we cannot end up doing this year, is not to say that those things are not important. It's not to say they're not good for kids. It's not to say that we don't see the benefit and value of it, okay? It's just to say that, again, we have a fixed amount of funds that we're able to move around with, and we're going to make the best decisions we can with the information that we have. Hopefully to help us with making those decisions and to align us with those decisions, we can use the foci that are here on this slide. And again, you've seen this slide before. I think I might have made it a little bit prettier. That's my opinion, it's prettier. But really want to just help set some parameters, if you will, or some guardrails that in the beginning of this year, I said that as a district, we need to focus on organizational clarity. And I called out 4 areas of clarity: identity, infrastructure, implementation, and identified focal populations. What I learned in my listening and as I laid out what I think that our foci should be for the year is that there was a lot of alignment between the things I was saying we need to do and the actions that were called out in our LCAP, our local control and accountability plan. And so this visual shows those two side by side. What I said is that we need to focus on our identified focal populations, which really is that we need to do what we said we were going to do. We need to operationalize and continue to fund things like our Black Lives Matter resolution, our African American Success Framework, our multilingual learner plan, which just approved this year, a Latinx resolution, and really think about how are we going to support our identity-based programs and how are we going to support those babies that year after year after year have not been able to have access or demonstrate all of their brilliance, because we need to target them in different ways. The other thing that I said that we need to do is develop a multi-tiered system of support. And that's thinking about how do we support our babies and all their different needs, be it academically or be they social, emotional, and behavioral. How do we say this is what all students get? And then what are our ways to identify students who aren't getting what they need and elevate them to another level of intervention and support? And so that actually was echoed not only in our LCAP, which called for us to really improve interventions and support programs, but it was also echoed actually in some of our consultants and some of our folks who work with us that said Berkeley needs to do better at figuring out how do we know who we're serving, and then how do we have a really strong plan to serve those who are not serving and monitor how we're doing that. I also said that we need to have some better data systems. Our data infrastructure, at least at the time of my entry, was kind of all over the place. And so folks were saying that they didn't have reliable data or consistent data, and sometimes no data at all. And so we've really focused on creating a data ecosystem, if you will, and that is also called out in our LCAP action of improving data collection and reporting. And then a part of infrastructure is the people and the systems that actually help get the work done. And so I definitely call out our need to really analyze our capacity. Do we have the right folks? Do we have enough folks? And do we have them in the right places? And so the staffing and the systems is something that I've asked that we prioritize as we think about all the things that we're trying to make real and true for our students. And then finally, I called for organizational clarity around instructional alignment and coherence or implementation, calling out our need to focus on literacy first. There's a whole bunch of other subjects that we need to address and talk about in different curriculum and pedagogy, but starting with curriculum to make sure our babies are literate and can engage across different content areas was the thing that I laid out. And that's really us implementing our literacy action plan, as well as thinking more strategically about our professional development. And that aligns to the action and the LCAP of improving core instruction. What you'll see on the left-hand side underneath our LCAP goals is another box with the graduation hat. By the way, there's 17 days left. I don't know if you guys knew that. Who's counting? Not me. I saw you, Miss Betty. There's another hat that we can no longer see because I don't know what part. There we go. That says maintain critical programs. And that's another way to have clarity, right? Is to think about what are the programs that we have, that we've seen make a difference for our students, and how do we make sure that we have them this year, we don't have them next year, but we're maintaining those programs. It's something else we need to keep in our head. And so I wanted to kind of ground us in those because there's a whole bunch of other stuff we can and want to do as a system, but I'm hoping that this will kind of bring us at least closer to being on the same page as we start to make some pretty challenging decisions. Next slide. I think you changed the order, Pauline. I'm looking for the slide with the core values for resource allocation.
Oh, okay, hold on. This is why when I went to there.
So the other thing I want to make sure that we are all kind of on the same page around as we prepare to inform some decisions is just kind of the values of our resource allocation. What do we want to be real and true at the end of our time together that we want to say we did for every resource that we allocated, be it a person resource or be it fiscal resource, right? Or be it time resource. And so they're here for you. I'm not going to go over each one just in the interest of time. You've seen them before. But I want you to just look at them and think about which one do you want to make sure that you or that we hold as we move into starting to grapple with and evaluate some of the budget requests. So leave this slide up, Pauline, for a second. I'm asking all of our members to look at this slide. Remember that sustainability and stability all go with that same definition of we allocate resources responsibly. And I want you to pick one value that you want to make sure that our team holds. They're all important. But which one do you want to make sure that our team holds as we go into making some recommendations this budgeting season? And go ahead and put those in the chat for me, please. What's one that's really critical to you that we hold as we move into budgeting season? The chat should be enabled. Excellence. And so that's the one we're talking about: continuous improvement, looking at metrics, progress monitoring. Sustainability. We don't want to be up and down, up and down. We want to be consistent and stable. A lot of folks want us to look at sustainability and excellence, and equity is something we want to make sure that we're holding. We want to make sure that we're looking at the things that are getting in the way of us serving all of our babies and making sure they achieve academic excellence. Oh, wow. It's a trend. Equity, sustainability, and excellence seem to be the three, and stability. And those kind of do go together. I guess y'all don't care about transparency, huh? Or engagement. It's okay. We are engaging right now, and we try to be transparent in all of these conversations, including our board ones. And so Nicole gonna vote twice and say transparency. So as we move into this budgeting decision-making time, folks, I'm gonna challenge us to really hold all 6 of these, because it's hard to hold all of them, but all of them are essential for us to make some really good decisions for our students and for our sites. I think all of them are essential for us to actually move towards realizing not just our mission, but our 4 E's of excellence, equity, engagement, and enrichment. Next slide, please. So here we go. We about to first figure out and understand what we're working with. And for me, that's something that my husband thinks that's really important. I just like to go and spend, but some would argue you should know kind of how much you got in the bank before you start spending and making decisions. So that's what this part of the agenda is. Pauline?
Thank you. So I'm going to share with you what we have already shared, our multi-year plan. And this is before we get the information on the governor's May revise. So we're still operating with our existing funding that I had talked about, adding back in the transportation and benefiting from the STIRS and PERS relief. Looking at this budget, it's actually, let's go back one. Hold on. So looking at this budget, if we spend, or if we determine our capacity is anywhere from 3.2 to 3.4 million, we're deficit spending, which means that we're spending more than we're actually earning, this blue line, but we have a balanced budget. We're positive at the end. Our ending fund balance is positive 2.7 million and 1.4. So that's just an overview if we're looking at $3.2 million in ongoing expenses. So further on in the presentation, we're going to go over our tier 1 in 2 buckets. We have tier 1 that we've already came from the prior year, and that's trued up. And then we have a new ask for tier 1. But looking at those totals and putting them in to our multi-year, this is what we're looking at. So, and we'll be sharing this with you in more detail. So we're looking at $2.4 million in ongoing costs, a $1.3 million in one-time costs in 23-24, and then tier one, that's less than a 0.5, that's like 0.03, and then 0.1 in 24-25. So when we're looking at the 23-24 budget, we'll actually add another year. We'll be looking at 25-26, but for the purpose of this presentation, we're looking at our multi-year at the second interim and adjusting it as needed. So bottom line, we do still have a balanced budget. We are deficit spending a little bit more, but even if we looked at all the tier ones, it fits in our budget as is. But remember, we're waiting for the governor's May revise. So and I think that's released on Friday, and I go to the workshop, I think, on the 25th. So we will have additional information on what the governor is thinking of for the May revise, and which may impact our determination for tier one. So with that, I think we're ready to start evaluating funding requests and proposals. Inika, did you want us to focus on our tier one recommendations?
Yeah, so before going on to there, I just want to lift the core value of transparency and want to check and see if there's anyone who has a question about what Pauline just shared in those previous two slides about what we're working with.
Matt and Nicole.
Hi, thanks. I just wanted to make sure that as we move forward, how you want the questions to be asked. Like, do you want to be stopped all the time? Do you want to save to the end? Just so we're all on the same page for this next part.
That's such a teacher. Thank you for that question, Matt. So I think we're going to do it the way that I just kind of did. Like after the slide, I'll stop and just see if there's any questions. But if I forget to do that, please, again, raise your hand or unmute and say, hey, over here. And I'll direct my attention to whoever this. Thank you. Nicole?
Thanks so much. Could you give me what the 20-second answer of what the funds are that we're drawing down at the bottom of the spreadsheet, Fundo 1 and the other LCAP 1 million supplemental? Are those ongoing balances that we're supposed to maintain as a district, or is that?
Yes, so thanks for that question, Nicole. So that's the district's obligation, first of all, for the LCAP balance. That's actually a board determination. We try and keep that balance of $1 million. So it's below the line, if you will. So it's not scored in the budget every year, but you can see that we look at this, we set aside this amount from the ending fund balance. And that's also where we're looking at our share of the 3% reserve for economic uncertainty. That's also included there. So the ending fund balance is a good number, but a more realistic number is looking at the undesignated fund balance, because from that fund balance, we have to set aside our obligations that are either board approved or in the ed code in terms of the 3%. Did that answer your question, Nicole?
A bit. I'm even a numbers wonk, and I think you might have lost me, but I'm trying to think about like, are we spending down our piggy bank, our savings piggy bank here, that if we run another 2 years full of that, are we gonna have nothing left in the piggy bank?
Not for, okay, so we are deficit spending, and at some point we can no longer do that. You want me to go back to that slide? So what Nicole is talking about are this section, the revolving cash and the supplemental. So it comes out of every ending fund balance, but it doesn't increase. So we determine every year our revolving cash is basically our petty cash that we have to set aside $100,000 for. Our LCAP grant, this is a board determination in terms of maintaining at least $1 million, setting that aside for when our LCAP funding decreases, and we have to use our reserve, if you will, for LCAP. And then the other one is our share of the 3% reserve. So this is something that I always present with our multi-year projections, because even though our ending fund balance is projected to be 7.1, 4.1 and 3.5, we have to set aside these amounts every year. So I prefer to focus us on the 4.9, the 2.2, and the 1.6.
Okay, thank you very much. Appreciate it.
You're welcome. Matt?
Sorry, just because we're on this slide, I just want to remind everyone that what's not listed here is that all 4 unions will be negotiating, you know, salary and other reopeners or complete contracts open in 24-25. And so although we're talking about 23-24, 23-24 has impact on 24-25. If you spend the money now and ongoing, then you don't have it later. And it's just sometimes we see a line item here that says negotiations TBD because, you know, we don't know, but just for this, so the group understands that, you know, 24-25, those numbers may change, you know, quite a bit.
Thanks, Matt.
Matt, put your hand down.
Teacher Matt, put your hand down.
So the first set of budget requests or budget items that we're going to look at are ones that you've actually seen before. We've put these in tier 1, and what that means is that they are consistent with those foci that I called out earlier. It also means that they may or may not be in compliance, something that we have to do. For all of these on this slide, they are the carryover from previous decisions that this SBAC and our board have made. What I mean by that is they are prior year commitments. And so you might recall at our very first or second meeting, we looked at all the things that the previous SBAC recommended and the things that were approved. And these were on that list. Most importantly, though, these things reflect budget expenditures that were on the list, but that were either coded as one time where they should have been ongoing, or for some of them put on a budget, put on a resource code that couldn't hold them, soft dollars or one-time dollars. And so we want to keep our commitments that we've made to students and families by moving these over to a funding source that can actually sustain them, and by moving them over to properly reflect that they are multi-year costs, if you will. And so I wanted to give you just a minute to remind yourself of these. Again, you've seen them before. These are not new asks, these are ongoing. And those are most of the top lines. What you'll see towards the bottom rows is that for some of these items, there's been a change in the cost for that particular thing. So if you look there, you see true up cost for Puente, which is associated with our Latinx resolution. Well, Puente was a prior commitment. So we want to carry that one over. But in our analysis, we see that the cost of Puente is no longer going to just be that $66,000 that we had originally budgeted, but that those costs are going to increase. And so Pauline uses the very technical term of truing up, and that's what this slide represents. Prior commitments, and we've made sure that they reflect this year's cost, if you will, of those commitments. And so that's this first slide. And for ongoing, they total about $1 million. I'll say it like that. Vicky?
Yeah, I just have a couple of questions. So does that mean that next year when we do the budget, the cost for Puente will be the 66 plus the 255 ongoing, and that 30,000 ongoing?
An additional 30,000 ongoing for 2024.
Okay, so the total will be like 300 and something. And is does that a program that has some sort of evaluation metrics that we're looking at to decide if we want to continue it, and how often do we look at that?
Okay, go ahead.
So Vicky, I'll start, and then we have our Associate Superintendent, Jill Hogan, on the call as well. What I'll say is, as we really try to bring to life the core value of excellence, what that value calls for, right, is for us to have some very clear metrics that we want each of these programs to move towards, and we have a system to progress monitor them. And so I'm going to say, I know you're asking specifically for Puente, but for all of these resources, we're really wanting to develop and be transparent about what is progress look like? What does success look like? That may be participation in the program. That might be outcome metrics, et cetera. So just wanted to kind of do a disclaimer that that's going to come up a lot as we have these budget conversations. And that's something that we're working on. Some of these things have those indicators. Some of these things don't. Jill, you want to say anything more about that?
Yeah. Hi, everybody. Can you hear me okay? I'm on my earphones. Yeah, I think the only thing that I would add to what the superintendent had to say is that this is one area that I think we haven't been able to fully turn attention to, but we know that we need to do that. In the context of organizational clarity, ultimately, we would want any of these programs to have metrics that are aligned where appropriate with our LCAP goals and measures, particularly because the LCAP, for example, in the context of Puente, would be theoretically aligned to some of our measures around the SBA data, for example. But we do also want to understand participation, graduation rates, attendance, et cetera. But then in BUSD in a uniform or in a uniform way. So we are looking at that.
So then I have a similar question about the RT Fisher for the Black Lives Matter. So those are separated. So I'm wondering if, even though they're to the same agency, so I'm wondering if those are two separate programs. And then there's that true up cost on the bottom. And I'm wondering which program that applies to. And then if next year that means the ongoing amount will be $350,000.
Before we answer that one, Vicki, there's a couple more questions that are related to Puente. So,
okay, no problem.
No, I'm just looking at Ms. Beatrice. You are correct, and I think our director of ASUDEF has already responded. But UC Berkeley does support with evaluation. That doesn't mean that they evaluate the entirety of the program, and we definitely want to set our own measures and expectations aligned to theirs, of course. But what we want to see the program do, and how many students we want to participate in it, et cetera. So we are still working really closely with a whole bunch of folks, including BCC and folks who are really strong with Puente, to figure out what those metrics and indicators could look like. And then Lindsay had another question related to Puente, was Puente and AVID. So AVID's not on here, Lindsay, so I'm going to focus on the Puente. It says, if it's being funded, what are the plans to increase use and measurement? So again, in our collaborations that we've been having specifically targeted, specifically focused on Puente, that has been a part of the conversation. How are we doing targeted outreach? How are we making sure that our families know what to expect of the program? How are we making sure that what we say they should expect is actually what they're getting? So we're working with the principals at the schools where we have Puente, as well as the Puente teachers themselves, as well as outside partners, including folks from BCC and Berkeley, to really kind of identify what those indicators are, but also what do we want to say our Puente program at BUSD is. So by answering those questions, Lindsay, we're hoping to be able to do, again, some more targeted outreach and get more people to participate and stay in the program. We are doing also, you all, just FYI, because Lindsay did mention AVID, we are doing kind of Jill will say it better than me, like an analysis of all the various programs that we have in our district. We have a lot of amazing and great things going on, and sometimes there's a lot of the same thing or similar thing. And so as we think about MTSS, or multiple tiered system of support, and thinking about focusing our target populations, we are wanting to have a better understanding of what we offer to the students, where there is similarity and alignment or duplication, and what's unique about other programs. So that analysis will be happening. It started, but it will be probably finished next year, and we'll kind of share that out. So I think that'll help us make some important decisions as well. Vicki, your question about the RT Fisher, et cetera. RT Fisher, College Bound, STEMSEPs, all of that is a part of the African American Success Framework. They've just been itemized because some of those folks, though they're a part of the framework, are different organizations or partners. Specifically for the RT Fisher, where it says STEMSEPs and implementation of the framework, those are different. The STEMSEPs is like the summer program, the enrichment. And so that's kind of calling that out as a cost, even though it is the same organization that might be facilitating or offering it. And then the implementation of the framework itself and the Parent Advisory Committee is the work that RT Fisher does, working with our various sites around the African American Success Framework, providing different services, and with the launch of the new African American Success African American Success Advisory Committee. So that's why they're itemized out, just so we can really look at what they're doing and have those kind of conversations. Just trying to see if there's any more questions in the chat, and then I'm scrolling up. There was a couple more hands. Nicole, I'm sorry, Pauline, go back to that other slide, please. We're still on that first one. Go ahead, Nicole.
Oh, I think Matt jumped me in line. He got
it's okay. I'm the teacher right now, so I'm doing equity sticks. No, you're
okay.
next.
I'm waiting to the end.
Okay, cool. I'll go for it then, if that's all right. So my question was also similar, is what, talking about the longevity of programs, if you could remind us what the timeline of our contract is with RT Fisher, or how long you see that program going with them. And then similar to that is, it sounds like you're evaluating the potential overlap or the correlation between that program and RISE, which I've really enjoyed learning a lot more about over the last couple of meetings here. And I'm looking forward to learning more about in the future as well.
So the African American Success Framework is written as a 3-year plan. To be clear, that doesn't mean we're going to stop supporting African American students and their success after 3 years, but the framework and the partnership with RT Fisher and the other partners named in the framework was set to be a 3-year plan with the idea of building internal capacity to then carry that work on after the 3 years. So I think that's the answer. Is that the answer you're looking for, Nicole? Did I answer your question?
I guess, and then thank you. And then I guess the question about how the RISE program dovetails with other programs in our district is part of the work that Jill and team are working on, I'm assuming.
Yep, that's a part of the work. We have so many amazing programs, including RISE, that may not do the same thing, but also target the same student groups, right? So we are very versed on RISE, and it is one of the acts that we will be exploring in the future recommendations that we're going to show you all. But yes, we are having those conversations.
Okay. Thank you.
I'm gonna go with Matt for 100.
Great. Okay. So I'm going to start with Puente and work my way down. So with Puente, I'm still unclear about the math on the money. I've read the MOU and tried to figure out what the actual costs are, both currently and in the out years. And I still don't quite see how it adds up to that much, which is fine because we're not budgeting for that much right now. But I do think we need to do a little bit more in-depth look to make sure that right now, actually, we don't even, they're supposed to have counselors that have some dedicated FTE towards Puente, and neither of them do. So I'm also unsure what the $66,000 is even paying for. If it's not paying for their FTE, it could be paying for the individual sections at the high school in Longfellow, which is just 2 total. So that would be about 40,000, maybe and then some programs. So I just want to say that it's unclear. The next thing I want to say is that I read through, I tried to watch the old board meetings and figure out about the contracts and the approval. And, the college-bound RT Fisher and STEM steps are all 1-year contracts. I also tried to find this idea of the 3-year timeline, and I was unable to find that, besides the fact that the framework itself is 3 years, but there's lots of stuff in the framework that we may or may not do depending on capacity. Those are all choices. And then in terms of college bound, and I said this before, I've asked, I think, for about a semester for attendance data, just because it's expensive and we have college counselors. And I just talked to one, and she has 800 students on her caseload, and she's on BSEP site funds every single year. In fact, both of our college counselors are. They each have 800 students on their caseloads. And we were just talking about, even finding, a 0.2 for BTA for a college counselor, right? And I still haven't figured out how it doesn't make sense to bring that in-house. For $125,000, you would have an entire college counselor. You could dedicate possibly 0.2 at BTA, serving, those, 30 seniors or whatever number of seniors there are there. Plus, you would have capacity 40 hours a week all year round. And so not to say college bound isn't doing good work. The question is, you know, can the district get more, right, for $125,000 with targeted interventions? And then, you know, and the same thing for STEM Steps. We have a summer program. We team up with Berkeley Public Schools Fund for CTE. There's lots of things that happen. And again, I'm wondering what things are being duplicated, and does it make sense, and how can we do it within our district? So I just wanted to point those things out. And I'm still waiting for the attendance data, because in the contracts, it says it's like $417 per student for college bound, although it's a total amount of money. If we were to divide per student for our college career counselors, 800 for the 800 students for the basically the same cost.
Thank you, Matt. I have answers, but I'm gonna let other folks.
No, are you going to ask questions? I can just take the Puente questions, just because the theme of what folks dropped in the chat was transparency. So Matt, you had called out a couple of questions about the Puente budget before, and we have been looking into that. So there are a number of costs associated with the Puente program, part of which is as the organization itself, which we do have funds from BSEP to help support that. We also have related costs relative to the teaching staff, the counselors, as you mentioned, and the administrator at admin support. This year, we were only supporting the classroom teacher allocation, so the 0.2 at Longfellow and the 0.2 at Berkeley High School. You are correct that the point that you had mentioned at the last meeting, that the Puente program for students should serve as their English class, and that theoretically both Longfellow and Berkeley High would have the funds for that class baked into their budget, because those students would have to take an English class anyway. That is true up until we check enrollment. So for any other class at Berkeley High, if they were under enrolled, they would close. They would divert those students to other sections. So if we're going to maintain a commitment to Puente, then we need to be able to provide additional support for that class if it's under enrolled, which was the case coming into this school year. They are finalizing enrollment for those sections now, so that number is likely to change. What we are looking at adding for the subsequent years is going to be capacity both for a counselor and for. In addition, Puente comes with an expectation and requirement for teachers and counselors who are involved in the program to participate in both summer professional development and then 9 PD days during the school year. So we were really building out the budget to support all of that work.
Miss Beatriz, and then Vicki.
Yeah, I first of all, I appreciate all the information that we're getting. And I think, one of the things that we should be looking at is the data of the students who are most needy, and how these students who are not on track for graduation, D's and F's, attendance and truancy, looking at those factors, helping plug these students into these programs. Right now, we're waiting for these students to come to the programs, and we should be reaching out specifically to those students. And I think that's what happens. These programs are there to serve our students, and the students don't even know these programs exist within Berkeley High School or even at Longfellow. So what are we doing to making sure these students are rising to the top, and we're making sure that they're getting connected to this menu of programs that are there to support students. Every school site knows what are the students that are falling behind, and how are we connecting them to these great programs that are here and available, and how are we making sure that parents also know about these programs, because I think that that's another gap. Not only students don't know, parents don't know.
Thank you for that, Ms. Beatrice. Totally agree. And that again is one of our things for organizational clarity. So a couple things I'll say is that first, we're trying to understand the programs that we have and offer, because you are right that some schools know and some schools don't, but as a system, we don't have a place where we're like, and here are all the programs that do X or that serve this student or that addresses this need, right? And so trying to compile that is the work we've been doing. We also, though, have been having some conversations of getting folks in the same room. So Ms. Betty, who's with RISE, Dr. Willis, who's with College Bound, the counselors at Berkeley High School and the BTA, we got together to start to learn and understand each other's programs, what we offer. What's going to better help us, I think, to know where our students are and what they need. You're right, innately, you know, a lot of educators know this baby needs additional support. But with our launch of EduClimber, with our focus on having a more data-informed system, we're able to not just make it like a feeling, but really clear data that says this student has not been coming to school, or this student is getting D's, or this student is falling through the cracks with literacy in this particular component, and then assigning them to a support or intervention, which again is a part of our MTSS framework that we're building out. And something that we're able to do now, because we have EduClimber that we're just started doing, is actually tagging our students who are in the different interventions, both to do what Vicki was asking for, which is figure out what's working and what's not working, right? So we can see like, hey, the kids who are in this program are getting this, you know, progressing in this way or not. But it also helps us to identify which students are not in anything, right? Which students, you know, you might have one student who's in 5 different programs and one who's in none. So you are spot on. And we're like, yep, keep saying it, because I think it does speak to our need for more organizational clarity, but also our need to have data systems that really can help us figure out where babies are and what we're doing to intervene, and if the interventions are actually working or making progress or not. I'm gonna take Vicki, and I'm gonna do a quick scan and see if we should go to the next slide. Go ahead,
Nikki. I'm gonna add just one point to what Aniki was talking about too, is the other piece that is surfacing is that we also have programs in competition with one another. So it also might not be that these students aren't getting enrolled, but they have a limited amount of space to choose an elective or a class. And we need to understand which classes they're choosing for that reason. So, but some of our programs are in competition with each other.
Okay, so a couple of comments and a question. So what I thought I heard was that there's low enrollment in Puente, which concerns me if we're going to be budgeting $300,000+. And I would think an English class is what, 20 students? That's a lot of money for 20 students. And if it's under enrolled, that's even less students that money is going to support. So we definitely either need to do some sort of outreach or you know, rethink that. So that would be helpful. And then I also sit on the SSC at Berkeley High, and we're looking at our BSEP funds, and we are within our site funds are already concerned that we are overlapping resources, particularly things that support like college-bound students for at-risk students. We just measured and evaluated what proposals we want to fund. And so I didn't even kind of, until Matt said it, look at the idea that college bound, it would then be another program that's competing with programs that our site funds, our BSEP site funds are paying for. And if, you know, and if this is something that's the same as what our site funds are paying for, maybe we should be using our site funds for something else. You know, so I think that information would be useful. But then my actual question is, all of these programs, have we also looked at any sort of LCAP funding for any of these things? Are these being completely funded in this way, or are they also being partially funded through LCAP, or could any of these be funded through LCAP?
I didn't know, Jill, if you wanted to answer the LCAP question.
Yes, I mean, we are looking as with any of these asks, we are scanning through the available resources to see if they can be funded this way. I think in the context of the LCAP, we were also looking for items that had clear alignment with existing LCAP goals. The specific example is popping up on my head was the request for additional capacity for So we currently have an LCAP goal that supports the ELD TSAs at our elementary schools. And so that was an area where we were able to add capacity, both because we had the available funding source and we had an existing LCAP goal in action around that.
Okay, friends. So again, really wanted you to refamiliarize yourself with this one, because these again these are not new. These are the commitments that SBAC made and our board made in previous year. And we wanted to make sure that we move them over and honor them and make sure they're funded properly. I appreciate the questions and the feedback. We are taking notes and this is being recorded, but I am going to really quickly, no, it's not just first generation college families. There's just any high schooler, Tucson, who wants the support goes, and there is slight differences between what that program does and others, but it is not just for first-time college goers. And we will definitely get the answers to the questions that you just put in the chat around college counselors, et cetera, and bring it back to the next meeting. So with that, we're going to go to the next slide, because y'all, this ain't even all of it. This is just the tip. So the next one is our new ask or new requests or proposals. And so, Colleen, can you go to the next slide, please? So we want to introduce these to you, because these you might have heard about maybe in some public comments or maybe at your school site, but we have not presented these to the group. Now, I just want to give you a little bit of context, and then I got you, Ms. Mildred, around how these new asks or these proposals come about. Some of these are reflective of what your advisory councils might have sent us or said that they wanted, right? Some of these are reflective of what site staff or central staff kind of brought to our attention from their engagement with families or in their own site budgeting process of extra needs. You heard some folks from Berkeley High School, for example, come and speak. Likely at the board meeting, you've heard some parents speak. So we've been kind of keeping note or keeping track. We do have a process to survey our sites and our central office departments and teams to get their ask. And then we asked you all to go to your different committees to get their ask and bring those back. And some of those came in that form that I gave you, but some of you guys also just sent emails. So we've tried to capture all the different asks that we've gotten and capture the things that we know that is coming up. So maybe somebody didn't ask, but we might know that we need to, get file cabinets for all the 12th grade classrooms or whatever, right? So we've tried to capture everything in the next series of slides that we're going to show you. But this first slide are our new funding requests and proposals that we as a central team, when we looked over the many asks, said that yes, these very much align to those resource allocation values, that they really align to the organizational clarity foci, that first slide I showed you, but the LCAP actions, et cetera, and or they're things that we have to do. So if you look at the list here, you'll see they range from BSEP to SPED to central office staff. So I wanted to give you a moment, if you didn't get the chance to do it last night, just to review these, and then we'll engage you in some questions. And so just to be clear, these are the things that of the acts that we got, and we got many, that we're like, these are ones that we think should be elevated to tier 1 and definitely be funded if funding is available. So right now we're just reviewing it, and then we'll overview and ask and take questions. I'm gonna just be really honest and let you know that wait time was always a challenge for me as a teacher. Some of you all are maybe still reading. My idea of time is ridiculous. So I felt like that was 20 minutes, but it probably was only 2. So please continue to look over this. But we do want to start to kind of give you kind of an overview of some of these and then take your questions. So as you all know, we have decided to move up BSEP. We were supposed to go to the ballot November 2024, but we're moving it up to March 2024. the month doesn't really matter. It still was going to happen in 2024. And there are costs to put a measure on the ballot and to renew this measure. And so the first line that you see is the renewal cost for BSEP as a one-time expense of $600,000. You may or may not know or recall, Kathy came and did a presentation on BSEP. Is a pretty significant chunk of our district's budget and allows us to do a lot of the things that makes Berkeley unique and non-traditional, including our small class sizes, library, arts programs. It funds people and programs. And so we definitely said this was tier 1 because we don't know what we would do without this funding source. So the $600,000 that it takes to renew it, we think is worth the millions that we get and the ways that we're able to really engage our babies as a result of it. The other things that you see. Thank you, Dan. Dan said we'll be
wow.
without BSEP. That's a pretty strong statement. Dan, we're going to take you around with us when we do our BSEP campaign. The other thing that you see is the next line is a SPED MOU with OUSD and BUSD. We are a part of a SELPA, and I'm going to not break up that acronym correctly. I apologize. Basically, we are part of a consortium of districts that put our money together to support our students who have additional needs. This is a medical therapy unit. And so we are part of the Alameda County SELPA. Alameda, Oakland, Albany, El Cerrito, all those districts are a part of this SELPA. And we have one unit where students who need more intensive support are able to go. It's called a medical therapy unit. And that unit is housed and has been housed in Oakland Unified School District. Because of some issues with the facilities, the original place, the place that we've housed it for forever is no longer available. And so we worked to find a new spot in Oakland, which we did, and portables. And this is our cost. This is Berkeley's slice for this medical therapy unit. All the districts have a part to play. And so that's $188,000 one time that you see. Special Education Local Plan Area. That's what SELPA stands for. Thank you, Pauline. So that, again, we elevated to tier 1 because it's compliance. We got to do it. The other thing that you see is staffing school campus aides and service assistants above enrollment projection. That is an existing cost that we have at our school sites, where our school sites, I think it's only elementary and middle, and Jill, correct me if I'm wrong, get additional support. Our schools have become to rely on that support. And so we are looking at that support, what it actually looks like at each site and what it's yielding, but they already have this resource. So we didn't want to take it away without doing an analysis. So this is a continued cost that this is a cost that we didn't have to continue, that we wanted to continue for our sites in the name of some level of consistency or stability. The Personnel Commission, you may or may not watch those meetings, but has asked for additional staff and operating expenses, and that's something that we have to do. So that is a compliance cost of $74,000. Pauline, did you want to say more about that one?
I have a question about that, Ms. Indicia Marple, please.
Yes, ma'am. Okay, so
let her do an overview, Ms. Mildred, and then I'll take your question. Okay.
So in terms of the Personnel Commission's budget, this is a budget that they come up with, and it's approved by Alameda County Office of Ed. It's funded by the general fund, and actually the Personnel Commission did have an ask on the survey. We have gone to the Personnel Commission in the past to try and explain, well, should you really put it on here and try and lobby? But the process is actually, I think it's in our ed code or in terms of funding our personnel commissions. So, so this is an additional ask. I think it's one staff person and a swing in the way that they're looking at their operational expenses. And that's an additional $74,000.
Ms. Mildred, we'll take your question now.
So understanding the merit rules and understanding the procedures, I'm not sure that asking for an additional staffing is a compliance. That's not something that has to happen. So I question that, but I would like to get more into it when after reading this particular slide that was put into our homework, I have some concerns, so I'll wait then.
Right, so the compliance part of it, Mildred, is we basically have to fund the Personnel Commission's budget.
Yes,
And
ma'am.
if it goes to the county and the county approves it, we can make suggestions about their budget, but we cannot inform their budget. We can partner with them. But if they decide, if they're asking for additional costs and they've written it in their budget, I cannot go to ACOE and say, you know, we disagree. You know, it's pretty much a done deal, if you will. So the process would need to be changed, I think, either in statute or in, I'm not sure if it's the ed code, and Sam is not here, but this is something that we're doing. We scored it as compliance because we are obligated to fund the Personnel Commission's budget that has been approved by Alameda County.
And so, Ms. Mitchell, we are going to get, that is our understanding, and that's why this is that ask is reflected on this slide. It was one of the many asks, and it was not necessarily tier one for us in the beginning, right? Until we understood that it's something that once it's put into their budget, if ACOE approves it, we have to go with it. So we are still seeking clarification on that one. And, you know, to your point, if it is not something that we're required to do, then we'll definitely engage in a different conversation around how essential.
I didn't find it in the ed code, nor did I find it in the California Personnel Commission rules.
Copy. So we noted it, and we'll circle back for sure. Ms. Vicky?
I can wait till after the overview.
All right, so the other thing that you see here is, I think you've heard me say a lot of times that I was really shocked to come to Berkeley and that we're a whole educational instructional organization, and our instructional team and department is not as robust as one would think. The person who kind of leads the curriculum and instruction is the person who also leads the SPED team and the student services team and the whole bunch of other teams, and that is our associate superintendent, Jill Hogendijk. And so one of the things that I caught out immediately as we focus on literacy, but just as we think about instructional coherence, is that we need someone to really hold the instructional piece of the organization and kind of lead that focus. So what you see here is a request for a curriculum and instructional director who can kind of, again, help with that alignment piece and really help us really switch our focus, to really help us build our focus on instruction and make sure we have robust programs, be that curriculum, be that coaches, be that support for our teachers and PD in place in our district. Jill, I don't know if you wanted to say more about that one. I want to kind of get through this slide because I want to make sure people have their questions, because there's a whole bunch more asks we ain't even looked at yet.
You did a good job. Thank you.
So the next one is the Longfellow 1.6 FTE. You may or may not, and it says new, because you may or may not recall that Longfellow kind of did a pilot, if you will, of a 7-period day. And the intent of that was to really think about how to best address the needs of the babies who were enrolling in and attending Longfellow, which at that time, the data was showing that those students were coming in needing additional reading support and intervention and below grade level. And so the response to that was to try out a 7-period day with the hopes of having those students engage in more intervention before and after school, in addition to the various classes that were offered at Longfellow during the quote unquote regular day. The idea of that pilot was supposed to be a year and then over. In our analysis of it, we definitely continue to see a need for Longfellow to be a focus school and to get additional support, but our data did not show us that the 7-period day itself was addressing the issue. And what I mean by that is we found that a good majority of the students weren't even participating in the intervention or enrichment that was offered as a part of the 7-period. In fact, a lot of them were just taking music, which they could have taken anyway. And so we've been working with the principal there, and she's been engaging her educators as well as her families and thinking about how do we still address the problem in a different way. And so our strategy at this point is to continue to offer more enrichment and support to the Longfellow students with a 1.6 FTE. And so that's why it's represented this way. So I want folks to not think about it as a 7-period day or not 7-period day. The problem that we were trying to address or solve for is the need for more support and intervention for those students. And that need is being met with this 1.6 FTE, which is kind of essentially keeping the staffing the same that it was this school year. So that is reflected as a new ask, but is kind of continuing something that we said we were trying to solve for in previous years, and that's $170,000. You'll also see the ask for a Title IX counselor. And it's really a 0.4 position. So that's why it's just a small amount. I shouldn't qualify it. That's why it's the amount of 43,000. 0.6 of this counselor is already being paid for out of a block grant. And we're asking for the 0.4 difference to make the position whole. But as you may or may not know, our Title IX department is made up of 2 people and a student intern. And that's the department where all of the investigations go, both staff and student investigations, all of our universal complaints and other complaints go, as well as all the investigations happen. And that's also the team that puts out curriculum and materials around consent and safety, et cetera. So we want to build that team up by making that position whole. We also have a line for Williams adoption or social studies. What we know is that we are going to have to adopt a social studies curriculum. I don't know how far back Berkeley is, but we are pretty not current. And so the ask for there is 50,000, and that is a compliance issue because we will have to go through an entire curriculum adoption process and adopt a curriculum for social studies. Ooh, I'm tired. I must take 3 hands just because I'm tired of talking. So we have Matt and Ms. Vicky and Ms. Mildred. So Matt?
I was actually first, but I'll let Matt go.
Yeah, I'm last.
This is a difficult group. Okay, go ahead, Ms. Mildred.
Thank you. So I have been very transparent with my concerns regarding the additional staffing and operating expenses for the Personnel Commission. I've been very transparent at this last Personnel Commission meeting, also with other groups regarding this. And the reason being is because ever since, I would say pretty much every year since 2017, we have been advocating for additional staffing for the admissions department, with the admissions department being very understaffed. And even more so now with a concern that happened within their department with their manager is even a greater concern. So we have been advocating, when I say we, I'm talking about BCCE have been advocating for many years to get additional staffing for the admissions department, as well as the payroll department. But in this last year, we have been discussing and constantly asking for additional staffing for the admissions department. Keep in mind, our admissions department is what brings in our ADA. That's how we are paid by our ADA. And you don't want that department to be understaffed. The reason why I'm bringing up the additional staffing for the Personnel Commission is because the concern with the admissions department was brought up last year, and it was just recently brought up at the last 2 personnel committees. You can look in the notes and see that it was brought up the last 2 meetings prior to this last one. So I feel that it's pretty biased to ask your department for a 0.5 admin assistant 3 position when we've been advocating and asking for additional staffing for the admissions department prior to you asking for a 0.5 for your department. That's bias. And that's concerning to me because it's of great need to have additional staffing in our admissions department as well as our payroll department before we get into asking for a 0.5 for the commission. And I'm just being transparent since that's one of our words. What was the quote that that you said that we need to look at that we can do? Let me look at it because I know I wrote it down. We can
anything, but not everything.
Absolutely. But one of the things that we can do is look at how we do our staffing. And even looking at through all of these concerns, and I'm looking at everything that's being asked, what I don't see is more support staff for, asking for BCCE members. Because when I look through all of these slides and I read all of this information, I see where a lot of these things fall on BCCE members, but I don't see that additional staffing to support these programs. And for example, in meeting with even the principal at Berkeley High School on March 23rd, 2023, we were discussing adding a 0.4 position to his student body account tech, who also brings in a lot of revenue for Berkeley High. That position is a 0.6 FTE, and that position generates income and has a lot of income that goes through that position. Now, we talked about this many times, and I just got an email recently saying I'm still looking into it. But then I'm looking at these slides in his budget that he's requesting. Now, I do support the extra safety officers. That is by far needed. Again, we've been talking about that. So I support that. But I'm seeing some other things that we didn't discuss, but what I don't see is this 0.6, this 0.4 in addition that we've been talking about. So I just want to say those things because these are things that I feel strongly above a lot of this other, stuff that I see needs to be in tier 1.
Yep. Thank you, Ms. Mojo. So that prompts me to make sure I clarify a couple of things. So again, we're sharing this with you all as new funding requests and proposals and going through them all, because one of your homeworks that I talked about is that you're going to respond to these. So I appreciate, Ms. Mojo, for you sharing that so the rest of the group can kind of have that context. But we are going to give you all as an SBAC team an opportunity to respond to these. Again, what we're proposing goes up as tier 1. The other thing that I would say is, I'm going to say it one more time, that when we first got the request for the additional staffing for Personnel Commission, we did not rank it as tier 1. But because of our understanding and because the meeting just happened that approved that, that's why we put it on here. But if we do find something different that says that we are actually misinformed, we don't have to go with that decision, then we'll bring that back to you as well, and we'll engage in a different conversation. But it is specifically there because of our understanding of compliance. It doesn't mean that we don't agree with some of the things that you said and some of the other needs that we have. So for everybody else, just know you will have a chance to respond to this as a part of your homework. This is our best thinking with what we have right now. I don't even know the order now. I'm scared to call a name. I think it's Vicky and then Matt. Okay.
Yeah, I wanted to comment or ask some questions about the Longfellow 1.6 FTE. I'm a huge advocate of the 7-period day. And so my question is do you have numbers on how many students were enrolled in support classes this year? I guess I'll pause there to see if you have a number. If not, that's fine. I'll continue.
I do have numbers. I don't have it readily available, so we can bring that back to the next.
Okay. And the reason I ask is because, again, we're comparing this, with other programs that we're funding. And again, we have said that some of those classes are under enrolled. But when my daughter was in 7th and 8th grade there and had the 7-period day, I feel like there were several sections of both English and math support and they're supposed to be small classes. So there's only about 10 students per class, but there were several sections of those classes. So like my guess would be like around 50 students, which is a higher number supported than, some of the other programs. And it's punitive because if a student has to take a support class during the school day, they're not able to take an elective. So then you have a student who's already struggling academically, who's taking, whether it was recommended or their parents forced them to take a support class, are now not able to have any enrichment classes. So I'm just not sure how this 1.6 is solving that unless you're offering electives during 0 period or support classes during 0 period. I think the only reason some students took music was because there was no longer a 0 period and not every student needs a support class. So I'm just not sure how that 1.6 is going to be used and solve that issue of a student not being able to take an elective if they're in a support class.
Thank you for that. And we will not come back and do a whole presentation, but we can definitely share with SBAC what that plan is. Definitely, as we were thinking about that, Ms. Vicky, we definitely understand the equity issues that sometimes come when students have to choose between intervention and enrichment. And again, engage in some pretty thoughtful conversations with the administration, looking at data, looking at who's taking what, and looking at impact, as well as staff. And also, I think she engaged some of her family leaders as well. But we can come back and kind of share or show you what the plan is of how we're going to actually be able to still address the need for students to possibly have more intervention while not denying them access to the many enrichment programs that exist at Longfellow. Matt?
Oh, I have one other quick question,
Sorry.
super quick. So for the curriculum and instructor director, so for example, like the Wilson social studies would be under their purview. Would they also be looking at some of the various SPED curriculums that we're asking for funding as well? Or does that stay within the SPED department?
Vicki, that's a good question. So the Wilson intervention would really stay within the SPED department, but if you can imagine, there are some intersecting circles with special education and curriculum. So there'll definitely need to be high levels of coordination and collaboration across those departments.
All right, y'all ready? All right, so sorry, I didn't see, I think I heard a noise. Okay, so the other, and you guys, this is just the
Am I gonna get to ask my question?
Oh, forgot about you, Matt. Sorry, Matt. Thank you, Matt.
I've been trying to be, quiet and patient. Okay, so I just want to say that I definitely see the need for a curriculum and instruction director. It's in our district office. It's something that gets like spread out amongst different people, and it's not centralized, and that causes all kinds of issues. My question around that, though, is that that's a brand new position. I also understood that maybe there's some closing of other positions or swaps. I'm just I want to understand, like, is there any savings in other district positions that maybe aren't being filled, or are we going to keep everything we have and then add that position? So that's my first question, and then I have one other question. Do you want to answer that one?
Yeah, we don't currently have a vacancy for this. This would be a brand new position, so it would require the additional funding source.
Okay, and
yeah,
so
we won't be able. It's another position that we're looking at relative to the literacy support that we have funding for, but we don't have funding for a director unless it's approved with this budget.
Okay, so it's just a new position. Great. And then my other question is, I'm trying to understand the Longfellow 1.6 as well. And I mean, these are my members, and I support them and I support what they're doing at Longfellow, but just thinking about how it kind of plays out, that seems to me that it's 8 sections of classes, right? A 1.6 is 8 sections of classes. And I'm just wondering how it was determined that was the right amount. And also, we know that Longfellow's population, because of the redistricting, is going to change over a 3-year period. In theory, there's going to be the same number of unduplicated students, not the same number, the same percentage at all 3 middle schools, with actual numbers being highest at King and lowest at Longfellow once it's all said and done, right? 3 years from now. So I'm wondering why this is an ongoing need and not a one-time need. If it is to offer the support that our current students have at Longfellow, where there is a higher proportion and a higher straight up number of unduplicated students that need support. So it's just my question about why is it in that category, and how did we come to it being 8 support classes, which is quite a lot.
Thank you. So again, in the interest of time, I'll make sure to share with you all just a brief overview of Ms. Mitchell's Longfellow plan. The idea was to kind of keep the staffing stable, so that 1.6 reflected the change that would have been going from the 7 to the 6. In terms of the ongoing versus the one time, that's a good point, and I appreciate that point. We know that the changes in the unduplicated will take a couple years, right? We still have our current 7th or next year's 7th and 8th graders that we need to attend to. But it might be that the conversation is around it being a 2-year or even a one-time. And so I appreciate you calling that out. And that's something that this team should definitely consider. I think as we're doing this, I'm like, oh yeah, and I should say this. Another thing to say is, as we're looking at these various asks, some asks, like a person, it costs what they cost, right? Like a salary for 1 year, et cetera, is the salary for 1 year. But as we're thinking about this, the kind of what Matt just modeled is that we do want to engage in conversations, particularly in our next one, of like, maybe we don't fund it all, maybe we fund some of it, or is it possible to fund it just for one time instead of ongoing? So those are kind of things that I think are helpful for you all to think about as you think about making recommendations for this budget. So our next series of ask is on that, underneath that little, it says, you can't only see it, says half a survey. Central office Ed services, we are looking for funds to support our professional development. Again, our focus continues to be on literacy for next year. We want to expand and build on all the literacy PD and the good stuff that we've seen happen this year. And so we are asking for literacy PD for all staff TKA, and that's with the core. And that's at $260,000 for that ask. And if Jill, if you want to chime in and say anything additional, feel free.
Just so that everyone understands what that is, we're looking at comprehensive professional development for PK8 for next year as part of our literacy action plan work. The Core Reading Programs is a partner that has worked with a number of other districts. They're located here in the East Bay, and a number of districts who have been focused on literacy have been involved in their training, and so we're looking to contract with them for next year.
The other thing that you see on here is, as you may or may not know, it was a new department created last year that started this year, which is our Department of Equity, Achievement, and Belonging. That department is over many things. And just so you all know, as we think about infrastructure and talk and plan for next year, we are thinking about reorg, which not necessarily means new people, but thinking about what is the make sense place to put different departments and teams. But currently the Equity, Achievement, and Belonging Department has CSAs, which is our comprehensive plan. Oh gosh, I'm gonna say that one wrong too. Our CSAs plan, our OFI, family coordinators, response to intervention, ethnic studies, and some of our targeted programs for our focal students. There's a lot that's underneath this department. But what was not given to that department was an administrative assistant to help funnel phone calls and organize things and just support the team. So that group has asked for an administrative assistant. And so that's what you see there where it says new 1.0 FTE admin assistant 2, is that typically when you create a department, there's some administrative assistance that goes with it. And that department was created without it and has been really trying to navigate all the responsibilities this year without it, but have made it clear that that's a need. The other one that you see is operational funds for that same department. And again, typically when a department is created, they have funds. They can buy materials or go to PDs, et cetera. So that is an ask of $68,000. And again, as we think about these, when it's not attached to salary, there can be conversation about the amount. The other ones that you see are SPED ask. SPED has an assessment called Lexia, and so we are asking for $19,000 for that particular assessment. We also are asking for some support for Malcolm X, which is going to have an SDC class, and that support is costing $200,000. Do we have Sean? Are you on the call, Sean? Sean is our Director of Special Education.
Sorry, Superintendent, take a look at your text message. I'm on the phone with Sean. We'll be there in a second.
Okay, so then also what you see is SPED support for the high school, an additional 0.6 FTE for occupational therapy at $28,000. And then you also see a request for technology services, which is to increase the Xerox print shop budget by an additional $90,000. The district is already incurring these expenses and is legally obligated to pay for them. That's why we coded this one as compliance. So those all of the new asks, those are all the new requests that we read and reviewed and was like, this seems like they fit for tier 1. And these will all be the ones that you're going to have an opportunity to respond to in your homework, where you can say, yep, I agree, that's tier 1, or you can say, nah, I think that's going to be tier 2. Particularly as you start to look at and see some of the other requests that have been made. So I see Vicky's hand.
Yeah, a couple of questions. The first one in regards to the OT at the high school, which I totally support. My question is that if we're currently paying to contract that and now we want to do in-house, is the savings from the money that we're paying for the contract services reflected in this, or is that savings not showing up here?
Ms. Vicky, I lost the whole big chunk of that. Your response.
Oh, okay.
Your question.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah, but is it about SPED?
Yeah, it is. So
let me hold SPED until Sean is on the call. Jill, is Sean coming?
Sorry, Superintendent. Yes, I'm on the phone with him right now because we're dealing with a situation. So he'll be here. Just give us a few minutes.
Copy. So Ms. Vicky, just so that I won't say it wrong or say it incompletely, can we hold that question until Sean's able to make it onto the call?
Sure. It's a more of a budget question, but that's fine.
Okay. Stephen?
Actually, mine was about SPED too, about the occupational therapist.
Okay. Nicole?
Mine is not about SPED this time. My question is similar to Vicky's in the sense that with the literacy PD, we had a really great conversation at last night's BSEP renewal community conversation plug. And the issue was that there's a finite amount of time that everyone can do PD. So I'm wondering if this shift, if we're going to be bringing in literacy PD in this program, that then we would not be completing other PD and there might be a savings on the PD budget on the other end.
So I can answer the professional development question generally. Literacy PD is definitely going to be a focus, but of other PD components that we're going to need to attend to for next year. So don't worry, Nicole, we're going to need to use the PD money. We've got a new science adoption for our early grades that will be coming to the board for approval. We've got some ethnic studies work that has been underway this year. We have some other related special education components that we will attend to. So there's a lot on deck, even though we do have a very limited amount of professional development real estate. We will be utilizing options to help to get substitutes and pay extra hours for folks. So more professional development to come.
So Vicki and Stephen, I did not forget about you, but again, I think Sean is tending to an emergency. So I'm gonna go ahead and keep going and then we can come back to that one when he gets on. Is that okay with you?
I'm sorry, I'm here right now. Sean. I'm driving. I really apologize. You know, I was supposed to come to this meeting. I got it confused with Planning and Oversight Committee. So I was like running home to make dinner and then join that, but here I am. What questions do you all have?
So Vicki has a more budget question, but it is about SPED. So I'm gonna let her start and then we'll go with you next, Stephen.
It's actually both. The first one is about the OT at the high school, which I'm totally in support of, but I'm wondering if we're currently contracting for those services, or is there going to be a savings in the contract amount that we're paying so that this budget's going to really cancel out our savings for that? That's part one of my question.
It's not really going to cancel it out because we were only contracting for about 0.4, but we've needed an increase due to the caseloads. So it'll be, I think there was like a $20,000 difference or something like that.
Okay, perfect. And then my second question is similar for the special day class at Malcolm X. Is that class going to bring students from other elementary schools who need those services to Malcolm X, or will it bring students from NPSs? And if it's bringing students from NPSs, will there then be a savings because we're not paying for the NPS?
It'll be for both. So we have some students, and of course, this is always subject to the IEP team and the agreement from parents. But we have a few students, a couple from non-public schools and some from a couple of the other schools that we feel would be better served in a special day class at this time. I get real hesitant about saying it's a savings. We will, of course, save money if we're bringing kids back from non-public schools. But, it really depends on the number of students we have in an SDC. I think the bigger question for me is, yes, it's a cost, but we're bringing students back to a least restrictive environment. We're bringing them back into our fold of our own community. And that's what's most important to me. But, you know, likely there will be a savings. We are working on staffing, of course. So, you know, I don't want to say it's going to be a savings because it really depends on the mix of kids that we have.
Thanks.
Hey, Sean, this is Steve Collins. I kind of have a similar question about the occupational therapist, but from a different angle than Vicky. And I think I understand, but I just want to clarify. So typically a 0.6 of an occupational therapist would cost the district about $80,000. But yeah. So it sounds like, so what you're doing is you're currently paying a contractor for a 0.4. And by making it a 1.0 and bringing it in-house, you're only having to pay an extra, it's only going to cost an extra $28,000?
Yeah, approximately that, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, we, so when I arrived in our district, we probably had 5 or 6 contracted occupational therapists. And so what I have started doing is, you know, we did a schedule analysis. We looked at our contract, making sure for caseloads, and we slowly started adding that FTE internally. And we have, at this point, then we'll be, unless we have some maternity leaves and we have to ask for agency to step in for that, we will have all of our OTs internal, which is actually a pretty big accomplishment. Most districts are contracting most of their OTs. So that says something about possibly our negotiations we've done where our OTs want to stay, as well as the community that's been built from those occupational therapists to keep our own staff and to draw people in.
Yeah, and I think it shows we're actually saving a ton of money because for just 28,000 you can get a 0.6. So that's good.
Yeah,
job.
I mean, I would say I'll be honest, it's probably equivalent from the agency and ours, because when you count in well, we're not saving 28,000. Like that's an additional amount.
Yeah. No, I understand,
okay.
But yeah.
But I would say it's almost equivalent, because when you put in when you look at benefits and things like that, it comes out to about the same. That is not true for, you know, some of the instructional aids that we're bringing in, especially our RBTs. That's a wide cost, but for our SLPs and our OTs that we've been contracting with, it's almost equivalent when you put in benefits. But you know, we want to hire our own staff.
All right, because all right. Well, 28 seems really, really low for a 0.6. You know, if you look at the salary schedule, a 0.6 would typically cost, including benefits, cost the district about 80,000.
Well, yeah.
I think he's using the 0.4 that's already being spent on the contractor.
Exactly. That would be the 0.2.
That's
0.2
only
difference. Yeah.
Oh, so you're not making it. You're going from 0.4 to 0.6.
Yes. So we're adding a point. We're adding a 0.2 to our FTE. Yeah.
Okay. Because it says we're adding a 0.6. Okay, you're adding a 0.2 and bringing it up to a 0.6.
Yeah, sorry if that wasn't clear. We were contracting for 0.4, but after doing a schedule analysis, we determined we need a little bit additional 0.2 in order to bring somebody full time. Because you know, you can't really bring somebody into a district on a, you know, sometimes working with agencies, we can get people that'll work part time. But to hire people internally, you know, we really need, and then plus the schedule showed that we needed the extra support.
Yeah, but you're saying that the amount listed doesn't include benefits, health and benefits?
What we did is we looked at the amount for whatever 0.6 was. And then we subtracted the amount that we were paying SBG for. And then what we came up as the 28,000 would be the difference for the additional 0.2.
Okay. Thanks, Sean.
Thank you.
Okay, so again, one of the, oh, I'm sorry, Lindsay.
All right. The representing the PAC had a lot of discussion this year about the new equity and belonging department and is very invested in supporting that department. And the question is that would those additional FTE or supports help achieve the focus of connecting families with the achievement portion of family engagement? Because that was, we saw lots of bright spots in the department and also opportunities to kind of connect the dots from goal 3 in the LCAP to goal 1 in the LCAP, and how creating a culture of belonging and awareness between students and families in school could improve our academic outcomes as well.
Lindsay, I'm sorry, you're asking about the equity, achievement and belonging admin assistant?
Yeah, and then you had a supplies or something or other.
Yep, surprise.
That was to that was to build out a bit of an operation. Here's what we learned. We created an entire department without operational support to support that department, inclusive of admin support or an operating budget. And we do recognize that, you know, that department in particular heavily engages with our stakeholder, our educational partners, and our parent group in particular. So Lindsay, I think what I want to acknowledge in your statement, if I'm understanding it correctly, is that, yeah, in order to agencies for that department, we have to have that administrative support so that the team doesn't have to focus on those things and can focus on the work.
Yeah, I think that you accurately interpreted my commentary. Thank you. Sorry, it was a little flubby.
Thank you. Hi, Terry.
Hello. My question is for Kathy, more as a heads up for tonight's P&O meeting related to the PD budget, and helping us understand why, if there are the resources, additional resources in the general fund related to PD, how that corresponds to the budget that the P&O is looking at for PD, which is over 2 million. So I just want to give Kathy a heads up that if she could address that at the meeting tonight, or if you're able to talk about that here, that would be great. Thank you.
I'm sorry, Terry, can you repeat the question? I missed that.
My basic question is just, is the PD budget from the P&O overlapping with any of the proposed PD that's in the budget that we're seeing? Because the P&O PD budget is over $2 million, and a fairly significant amount of PD is being talked about here with additional resources available to spend. And so I'm wondering if PD can be transferred out of BSEP into the general fund. It's basically my bottom line question, I think.
Okay, I'm not seeing
Kathy more of the details than I do. So Kathy, I'll take a running start, but a significant amount of the professional development BSEP money involves the staffing that we have for professional development. So that would be our literacy TSA, our math TSAs. There's some staff at Berkeley High School. I know I sat at that table at last night's event, so I should have these internalized, but I'm not remembering all the details. So that is different from development that you see articulated here that we're tagging for the AMIM grant.
I would concur with that. I think the majority of the PD budget in BSEP is staffing, and I do not see any overlap on these from these two sources, but we can look at it more closely, Terry.
Okay, well, I appreciate that starter response. Thanks a lot.
Thank you. I don't see any more hands, and I didn't see any more questions or comments in the chat. So, oh, sorry. The positions being recommended, does that include salary and benefits or just salary? Pauline, those should include salary and benefits. Is that correct?
Yeah, it includes both salary and benefits as the full cost.
There's another question about Lexia Core 5. It's an educational technology used as a supplement. And the question is it possible for the people and for the staff at high school to be trained in Core as well?
Yes, that's actually, well, I'll speak from the special education services side that is being implemented currently right now. We have done a star screener for all of our students with IEPs, or majority of them. And then we're doing a deeper dive with DIBELS. And then next year we have one of our case managers who will be coaching all of our CLC teachers in using Lexia, as well as doing intervention directly with students in Wilson who may need, still have some orthographic processing needs. So yes, that is, and Lexia is currently being used by some of the teachers there. So we are working on that.
Okay, so again, the next step for these Tier 1 new fund proposals or new fund requests is that you all, by tomorrow evening, will receive a form that has each of these delineated, and will ask for your response if you agree that it's Tier 1, or if you suggest it to be a different tier. So you will have the option of marking it as Tier 1, Tier 2, or Tier 3. You will also have a section that allows for you to make comments. So again, these are the ones that we have elevated as Tier 1, and we still have a lot more asks that we want to preview with you all that we're going to also ask you to respond to. I should appreciate everybody's thoughtful questions and engagement thus far. And so we're going to go to the next slide, Pauline. So this next series of slides, again, are other funding requests and proposals that we have not scored yet, or that when we received them, did not score them as Tier 1. And so what you'll see is that there are a number of different requests, and we've tried to group them. We've tried to group them by categories like instructional, wellness, safety. What you'll notice is that on this slide, it doesn't have, not only does it not have any tiers, it doesn't have a justification, it doesn't have settlements, and the notes are very vague. But we definitely believe in transparency and engagement. And so when you look at the slide deck, you'll see that the subsequent slides, it actually says more detail, and that's where you can find more detail about these various line items. And so there are, sorry?
Superintendent, we received a wellness center presentation that I linked here. So I don't know if we can look at that now, or if you can ask the team to view it. It has additional information on the wellness center request at the high school.
Thank you. So we're going to ask you all to review it. I know P&O has a meeting in 6 minutes, and there's 6 minutes before this one is over. So we're going to, you should already have all the slides, but you will get the slides again. And just want to again point to the fact that in subsequent slides, there's more detail. Pauline, can you go to the section that has the more details on the Tier 2 and Tier 3 needs and expenses? If you keep moving the slides, well, not this one, not this one, not this one. There we go, it's coming. So slides 20 through 22. If you see, those same asks are there, but it has a little bit more detail for you all to consider and engage. And then at our next meeting, we'll come back and see how you responded to our Tier 1, but also get your thoughts on how these additional asks rank in terms of Tier 1, Tier 2, and Tier 3, and we'll engage in another discussion. I got you, Lindsay. One thing that I was told as I'm new here is that it is not uncommon for the SBAC to add additional meetings. And so what we're going to do is send out the homework for you to respond to Tier 1 first. That's first priority. And then for you to start thinking about where you might place these additional asks. And then more than likely, we will request that we have an additional meeting with you all, likely before the May 23rd meeting, but possibly after. So depending on what the feedback is, we'll give you more information about when other meetings might happen. But want to make sure you hold May 23rd and that you keep that 2-hour block that we just spent today. Sorry, Steve, I see you have a question.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I think someone might have just written in the chat too, but just to be clear, we expect to have a balanced budget with a minor spending deficit, including, and that includes all the tier 1 spending, right?
Correct.
So then tier 2 and tier 3 is the plan that we would do offsetting cuts. We would go into looking at cuts to make up for if we go beyond that and get into deficit spending too much. Are we going to be looking at making cuts anywhere?
So the way that Pauline and I are going to organize it when you get the Google document or the form is that there'll be, if we get another 500,000, like what's the next thing? So when you're ranking them as tier 2 or tier 3, you're going to have some qualifiers, if you will, that'll help you move those things into those other buckets. At this point, we are not anticipating cuts, Stephen, because again, we've been able to maintain our previous commitments. We have some new acts that we think are tier 1, but you all might have different opinions. And then again, it's going to be back to, I see Tasung asked the question, what if we think everything is tier 1? Tasung, I almost want everybody to say it corally. We can do anything, but we can't do everything. So we're going to have to engage in some hard conversations, Tasung, if everything comes back as tier 1. But everything should not come back as tier 1 because everything does not necessarily meet those criteria that I laid out in that foci slide, and everything is not immediate. Some things we can think about doing in future years. But that is why this group exists, Tasung, and that is the challenge, is because there's likely nothing on these requests that we're like, that isn't needed, or that isn't a good idea, or that might not be great for kids. But again, we have a fixed pot. What I will say is that there are places that you'll see on the slides as you review them, or even on the spreadsheet, where we've been able to find other places to fund that. So that's kind of like a process thing. We'll talk about that the next one, but I'm telling you, we can't do all of it. Right. So we like dots, and dots are important, but I want to do dots with data, right? Because sometimes dots are informed by our feelings or what we think we know. So if we find ourselves really, in a debate, if you will, then we're going to bring more information and data to help us make informed decisions. Though a dot might be an option, we probably will look for more than just dot voting, which is why we want to give you some time to look at these things. And at the next meeting, similar to how we did today, you'll have a chance to get your questions asked and answered. But again, we're going to put some parameters around it, Stephen, that'll help you as you think about what should be in tier 2 and tier 3. And that might also help you when you decide, like, actually, we disagree with you all. We don't think this should not be in tier 1. Vicki?
I think you just answered my question, but I was going to say, hypothetically, we could come back and say, we really think this item needs to be risen to tier 1 in lieu of something else that's in tier 1 that can be moved down, correct?
Yes. Yes. Oh Lord, yes.
Yes. Yes.
Miss Betty?
Yeah, I was just double checking. Is RISE not in tier 2 and 3 as a new request?
So those are that slide, I hope, is not misrepresentative. So they should be additional requests, and RISE is reflected in additional requests. If it's not reflected in one of our, I guess it wasn't in tier 1 because I just went over tier 1, but RISE is definitely listed on those other additional requests. And I do appreciate that feedback, because if it says tier 2 or tier 3, that's misleading, because the group does have an opportunity to say that they think those things should be elevated to tier 1.
Thank you.
So again, the next steps are that you are going to receive a Google Doc, hopefully by end of day tomorrow, that will again list out all of those tier 1s that we just went over in detail. We will distinguish the tier 1s that are ongoing commitments or keeping our promises, which was that first slide, from those that are new ask, which is that second tier 1 slide. So you'll have a chance to respond to those. And then you'll also have an opportunity to respond to all those other asks, which there are many of them that were reflected in public comments, or sometimes even some of the comments at the board meetings that have not been scored, and you'll have a chance to weigh in, aware that we can do everything but not anything, and then we'll come back and have another robust conversation. You might actually get an email that asks for additional times that you're able to meet as well. So RISE did, I'm sorry, there's a question, Miss Betty. I do know that 30,000, if I'm not correct, Kathy, 30,000 of VSEP dollars supports tutoring for RISE. Is that correct?
Yeah, we have morning, lunch, and after school tutorial, also weekend and Zoom tutorial. So that provides for all of our academic mentors from Cal.
Okay, so that's just a point of correction or clarification, because Ms. Betty, in all her passion, talks about no funding from BUSD, but I think we do have folks from P&O here, and we do want to clarify there's about 30,000 from BSEP that supports RISE, and the ask is, how do we really show that this program is important to us by contributing additional dollars to RISE? So the question, did I actually, you guys, I'm tired now. Ms. Betty, the question was, did RISE request BHS for site funds? What was the answer to that?
Yes, they did.
Okay.
Okay, because I'm not sure what that means.
Berkeley High School. Berkeley High School. So, you know,
we have gotten, we got this school public fund to do our mental health last year, and we got it this year to do our research project with SF State. So is that what that means?
No, so there's site funds that go to Berkeley High School from BSEP, and we have a $1.2 million budget, and one of their requests is 30,000 for RISE.
Yeah, that's the only way we can provide for our tutors, our academic mentors.
Okay, but to be clear, that's the same 30,000 already that's been allocated for tutoring, right? And so that's different than the ask that's reflected on the RISE request.
Yeah, we're asking like similar projects that are actually spin-offs of our program that fund their staff members and their actual program. Our program has never been funded, but we do write grants to get different little pieces funded. So it's dependent on every single year.
Okay, friends, homework is coming. It's going to be really important that folks really take the time to do the homework, because that's going to really inform our next steps. And again, you will likely get a survey around additional times that you can meet. But for now, May 23rd is our next meeting, and we are asking for it to be an extended meeting from 4 to 6. And so that survey might ask for more dates, but it also might ask for us to just make that May 23rd meeting longer. So that's an option as well. I see a hand. Lindsay.
Oh, sorry, are you asking for this homework to be done as a committee, or are you asking for us to be individual representatives, you know, voicing the opinions that we've heard in past committee meetings? I guess maybe that's not.
No, that's nuanced. Because we talked about you all are individuals, yes, and you have your perspectives and ideas, but you come representing different advisory groups and labor groups, et cetera. So the best way to do it is that you either go to your group or, you know, channel all that you've heard from them and the feedback that you've gotten from previous meetings to represent the scoring that is representative of the group or the body that you represent. That said, you have been identified from that group for you, Lindsay, from PAC to be the representative. So I think, you know, I'm gonna leave it to you if you guys go back and have a full-on meeting with the group, or if you, again, use your role as representative and all that you've learned from that group to inform how you rank or tier. What I will say is that they're going to be timely responses. So we're going to give you a time or a date to get it back to us. And so we don't want meetings to hold that up, if that answers your question. Does it? Lindsay? She's gone. Oh, she wrote in the chat. Lindsay, you can't start off talking and then move to chat. She wrote in the chat. She said, yes.
Sorry, my 7-year-old is like on me.
It's okay. Totally understand. So, okay. So everyone has an assignment. And then just to be clear, the reason why we're doing it as a Google form is that there has been feedback that sometimes some voices are louder than others. We want to make sure we are able to say and show that each of you, and therefore each of your committees that you represent or your labor unions that you represent, got to kind of have input. And we'll have a visual way to show where everything falls. Whew. It is 17 days before the year is over, y'all, and we are excited, and that is great, but there is much anxiety that always comes at the end of the year because there's all this stuff like this that we have to do. I appreciate you for these 2 hours. Appreciate you in advance for doing your homework, and thank you for your thoughtful participation. Bye.
Bye. Thank you.
Bye, guys. Bye.
Night,
Thank
everyone.
you. See you soon.
Bye.
Bye, Natasha.